Now, today we're going to learn all kinds of fun facts about history, like, for instance, why the Roman Empire split. Because of a pair of Caesars. Roll the intro. I'm not gonna lie, that wasn't my best joke, but I liked it.
I liked it.
Let's get everybody in the room real quick. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, thank you so
Awesome.
much for having us on tonight.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure. For our audience who doesn't know, this is Scott and Jen from an amazing YouTube channel called Walking with History. I love history. I grew up around it. It is part of my DNA, and actually a really close bond I have with my dad. So naturally I gravitate to kind of stuff like that. I think you guys' channel's awesome. And yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun getting to talk about some cool stuff, getting to know you guys, and have our audience, come and hopefully watch some of your content, especially since we're talking to fellow veterans.
Right on.
That's right.
So that's pretty awesome. Doug, how's your history? Is it good?
So I'll be honest. History was never my strong suit. It was one of those subjects in class that I was just like, all right, let's get on with it. It's nothing is exciting here, but I will have to say wholeheartedly, the way that you describe history, it's intriguing. Like, I'm actually paying attention and learning stuff. And I was like, man, I'm getting smarter now. Seth is going to love this one.
I love it.
So Doug, I'll have to be honest. So for your audience, for those who don't know us, I'm Scott, and this is my wife, Jen.
Hi.
So Jen's the historian. I married into like the history nerddom in this house, and my goal I'm the producer, editor, extraordinaire behind the scenes for the vast majority of our videos. And so I'm actually learning while I'm making it, because I am not a history buff whatsoever. I was much like you, Doug, when I was in high school. Like, history wasn't, I had one great history teacher, shout out to Mr. Beck in San Dimas High School. But it was not my cup of tea. This one right here is the one who kind of got this off the ground, and we team up together.
Yeah. I kind of grew into it, guys. So, I was in the Navy, and, going over to the Middle East for the first time, I wanted to know more, right? Like, what's going on? Why are people, these deep rooted hostilities going on? I wanted to understand more of it. And every time we pulled into port too, it became my job to kind of put out the brief to the whole crew of where we were going. What's the history of the area? What kind of money do they use? What kind of tours do you want to see here? So I kind of got immersed in that kind of history.
That would have been nice for me to have. I just got told the places I wasn't allowed to go.
Yeah. Right?
That's probably what you heard.
Yeah.
And
you're like, I'm
pretty
going there
confident
first.
They probably said some other things. You just heard all the places you weren't allowed to go so that you could go there later.
And so then when
you might be right on that one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Believe me, I've walked into a couple of establishments and I'm like, oh, there's my guy right over there.
Yes.
So then coming back after deployment and after getting out of the military, I used my GI Bill because I hadn't had kids yet. So I hadn't given it to them. And I went back to school to get a master's of history. I wanted to understand, how do people study this? How do people, quantitate it? Because, talking about science and math, I knew that, but how does something in history gain fact, gain truth, have merit? And so I went back to grad school, and I graduated 20 years after my undergrad. I felt like the old lady there, but it was great. I actually went back to school and I got the master's degree of history. And then what do you do with that? Right? I'm married to an active duty officer, we move around every 3 years. It's hard to keep a job. So why not do a YouTube channel? It moves
perfect.
around, right? It
Yep.
kind of, it
Right?
fit.
Mm.
It fit. And so we move around. And so then our radius can change. We can take you there. And like you said, Doug, why I try to emphasize, why does this matter to you? Right? What's the point? Why am I telling you this story? Because history will impact you whether or not you realize it.
Mhm.
Right? It's having an impact on you. So I try to do that. I try to connect the dots. So why should you care about this? And tell interesting stories along the way, motivational stories, a lot of like unsung heroes of Gettysburg or Civil War, things like that, things that we can kind of, aspire to or hear about. And as a patriot, kind of like, what are we defending? Right?
Mhm.
Who has defended before us? What have they done before us? And what are we defending now and looking forward into the future?
That's awesome. Doug, you think you can get on board with that?
Maybe like it's gonna take a little bit because I mean, like I said, it was just, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Like I was sitting there in class and I was like, "What is the point of this?" I mean, I was 38 when I went back to college. I
Mhm.
was older than probably about 90% of my professors, and I'd walk into class and it'd be this old crusty dude teaching, history, and I'm just sitting there like, "Why do I have to take this? This is
Mhm.
interesting whatsoever." Now, I will admit there was certain points where I was like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of cool." But at the end of the day, I was like, "This is just draining for me."
I know. And it shouldn't feel that way. It should feel invigorating. It should feel exciting. Like I try to make it fun and like we're here, we're standing where George Washington stood, where he touched that. Like I
That
stand on Jimmy Stewart's porch. I'm like, I'm on Jimmy Stewart's porch. Like
and that's cool stuff. I mean, so my biggest thing in life was the areas of the world that I wanted to travel to. I wanted to travel to ancient places. I
Mhm.
wanted to travel to places with that were very old. And growing up in New England, specifically in York, Maine, all right, we're pretty old there, all right.
Yeah.
But you're only ever going to be like 200-300 years old,
Mhm.
in the United States, right? So unless you start really going back further, and actually in York, Maine, we have a world treasure that most people don't know about. I'll go to that in a second, but um yeah, just having all that history around. And so naturally when I was in the Navy and I would hit a port like Toulon, France, and I was lucky enough to have a buddy that could speak fluent French. uh I was walking through this uh beautiful stone archway that kind of looked like a bridge, but it didn't really go anywhere. And there was a plaque on the side, and I asked him to read it, and he said that this is where Napoleon marched through to retake France. And
Mhm.
I lost it. I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
I'm standing where Napoleon Bonaparte marched his army back through from Italy, if I can remember correctly.
Mhm.
All right. And I
Yep.
just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And so for me, it was, if I can go to places that have history, the older the better. So I'd love to go to places like Egypt.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know what? I'll go to any country that has like what are the UNESCO World Heritage sites, right? Those
Sure.
things where it's like we'll never demolish these in the world because this
Yep.
is part of human history.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
cool.
Those places are fascinating to me, and I would love to go. But you have a specific kind of wheelhouse, and that is American history.
So I got my master's in that because if you do world history, you have to speak a foreign language. And if you know me,
That's
I
cool.
barely mastered English. So there's no way I'm speaking another language. You should see me, even when we go to France. Thank God Scott can read French. I try to read it phonetically. I look like the biggest moron. So I do not even try to open my mouth. Um, so I did American history because it made it easy. I only have to know English. So that's kind of why I centered on that mostly. Now, you can't really study American history without knowing world history too, because you're going to be
Correct.
impacted, right? Like even Napoleon is impacting America. Uh, you know, America's impacting other countries at the same time. So you have to really understand world history at the same time. You're just not emphasizing it as much.
I mean, was
So,
it Frederick Bastiat, I think was his name, was a French philosopher and writer that we
mhm,
base a lot of our the sense of our laws around some of
Yep.
his work. And
yes.
Yep.
wasn't American.
Nope. The Enlightenment it was
Yeah.
basically coming from the French. And America is studying world history. It is impacted by it. So even though I emphasized American, and even our channel is mostly in America, but we have gone to London. I will be at the 80th anniversary of D-Day. So I'm going to be in Normandy.
Yeah.
So, and
Wow.
I'm going to hit Paris. So we do venture out a little bit if we can get out there. It does still connect to America.
Mhm.
So, but I do try to get in other places, but really we do really center on American history.
That's awesome. Doug, what was the oldest place you went? America or abroad?
I have to say it was when I was in Baghdad, Iraq, and
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I did visited the cross swords. So I will say on the history aspect, it's kind of cool to know that, you know, in years to come when school kids are reading about like the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and all that. And even to this day, when I see on Facebook, like people posting pictures of the cross swords and everything, and I'm like, man, I was there. Like I climbed up the top and I looked down from the handle and whatnot.
Wow.
It's cool to know that you are a part of that.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
to place your feet like right where like Saddam Hussein was, and not saying that like, he was great or anything, but just knowing that you were there in the same spot. I mean, that's kind of cool. But that's the oldest spot that I've been to.
Oh yeah, well, that's one of the oldest beginnings of civilization, Middle East, right?
Yeah,
So,
and for me, that's kind of a future goal. Is like Seth, like you were saying, is for us to be able to do more world travel, right? You know, I've got plenty of time. You know, hope knock on wood left in the Navy. But you know, we're building this channel now to kind of build it to a little bit of a business so that I can hopefully make some money and supplement retirement so that when our kids are out of the house, then we can run off and kind of do this, you know, as for retirement, you know, with supporting it with some income. We've got some other stuff that we're kind of slowly building on the side and stuff like that as part of this kind of history thing. So,
well, I'm 100% for a History Channel campaign.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys, one, you definitely have the cadence, right, and the voices for it, and the knowledge, and I think that the duo thing is awesome.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
I don't see why they wouldn't pick it up, honestly.
But, yeah, well, we joke all the time with our subscribers. We do it more on our podcast, Talk with History. But we say, hey guys, we're only, you know, the YouTube channel is only like 10.5 million subscribers away from beating the History Channel. Like, let's pick up the pace. You know, we're only 10, 11 million subscribers. So we're coming after you, History Channel. Like, let's bring history back to the History Channel.
Bring history back to the History Channel. Yeah.
Right.
Good.
Yeah. Can we get rid of Ancient Aliens and Pawn Stars and
all
American
the conspiracy
Pickers?
shows and stuff?
Wait, you don't believe in aliens?
All right, we're not Doug.
What?
Doug.
They're a part of history
in front of my friends.
It's some history, right? Area 51.
It's true.
Blue Book, right?
Very true. That is very true. So a little bit for myself, because like Doug said, he's never been a humongous fan of history, but fully understand because the things he's our fans of, he educates me on.
What would that be besides pizza?
Well, you educate me on how someone can consistently believe there's no dinosaurs or the earth is flat.
Telling you. Telling you.
All
my evidence is stacked and you just can't argue it.
In a hoodie, my friend. I'm telling you.
You just can't argue it, son. That's what you get annoyed with, is that you try to be the smart one and then I drop knowledge on you and you're just like, I have nothing because he's right. Game, set, match.
Aliens.
Yeah.
This is Doug. So for myself, all right, history has been kind of a huge part of my life. One of the fondest memories I have is my dad sharing with me the story of Leonidas and the 300 and the Battle of Thermopylae. Yeah. Before I even knew that Frank Miller wrote a comic about it and eventually gets turned into a movie. Right. So he would tell me all these stories of ancient Rome and ancient Greece. And because he was a big ancient history buff, and I would find them fascinating. So like when you're a little boy and you're hearing all these crazy battles, you know, how 300 Spartans, you know, fended off the entire Persian army. And then you come to realize, like, well, the Persian army had wicker baskets as shields that they don't really count, you know. But regardless, you know, it was a lot of fun. And so I started to gravitate more towards that. I still have a book that's like 3 inches thick he gave me about the history of Rome. And then I would start to notice things around my hometown of York, Maine, that were very historical, like I think we have the oldest schoolhouse and the oldest jailhouse, or one of the
Oh.
oldest jailhouses. We have a crazy statue that's been there since 1906 that has a lot of folklore around it, that it was a Confederate soldier statue that was mixed up in transit
Oh,
of the
interesting.
South.
Yeah.
And that when we asked to get ours back, the South had destroyed ours.
Yeah.
But we erected ours anyways. Now, like I said, it is folklore, but there's certain things about the sculpture and the uniform of the soldier, which really was supposed to be dedicated to the soldiers and sailors from that town,
Mhm.
that make it look somewhat Confederate, but it's not.
Mhm.
But it's still fun folklore.
Yeah, sure.
And then I didn't even know this until 2 years ago, but apparently we've had a Viking ship under the beaches at Short Sands Beach in York, Maine for hundreds of years.
Oh yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So every once in a while, I think the last time was like 40 years ago, a big storm will come in and wash away all the sand, and it'll actually show the remnants of this Viking ship
How cool.
in this cove. And they never remove it because obviously it'd be too costly to sit there and constantly
Fragile.
preserve it.
Yeah.
So they just take the time to research as much as they can, and then they fill it back up and they let it go, and they wait for another big storm to come in. So I would find all kinds of stuff like that. And it just kind of grew from there. And I've loved history ever since. And yes, in fact, I did get a D in history, but that was just because I either one wasn't there, or two, I just wasn't doing my homework. But I just,
Such a
just
great
been huge thing
example.
for me. And everything I like, the materialistic things that I have that I kind of treasure the most, all have history with it in some form or fashion. I actually have a really good example right in front of me. I'm a giant nerd, if you can't notice from my background. I have this wonderful comic book. It's super rare, but it's called, see if I can get it, called Grenada.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right. The only way you would ever got this book is if you were in Grenada, because the CIA dropped thousands of copies of it as
That's cool.
propaganda before
Oh
we invaded.
wow.
Under what was it? It was a company called Voice, which was the victims of international communist emissaries. So, like, still, it's a comic book,
interesting.
comic books, but that is a piece of history, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I loved it. I gravitated towards it, and I wanted to have it. So that's kind of just been my thing here and there. And I agree. I love to see you guys on the History Channel instead of half the stuff that I see nowadays.
Well, yeah.
What happened in documentaries? Like,
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
just, I mean, you probably got a D in history, because history a lot of times is rote memorization,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People expect you to memorize dates and times and battles and the names. Name me the first 20 presidents. Name me the first, like, it's hard. But if you make that stuff kind of fun, and you want to remember, okay, what's leading into this? What's leading into this? What's influencing this next battle, influencing this? Like, we just talked about the death of Meriwether Lewis. Meriwether Lewis decides to travel across land instead of down to New Orleans and get on a ship, because he's afraid of impressments and the British. This is 1810, right? That's what's going to pull us into the War of 1812. Is the British keep impressing our sailors into their navy.
Yeah. And this is like Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark. So that's influencing him. So if you think about that, and then he dies in 1809, like, you can memorize dates if you understand how things are connected and influencing each other. And that's how you make history fun. It's like, oh, because these people aren't just operating in a vacuum. Like, they're influenced by the time as well. So it's very interesting to see how things are just connected, especially American history, how all of our heroes and things we learn, they're kind of connected together with a string. And if you kind of pull that string, you can kind of understand how it's all working together. And I think that's what a good history teacher does.
Yeah, my thing is that history is not black and white.
No,
No,
absolutely
It's
not.
very gray. It is
Very gray.
very, very gray.
Mhm.
And it's one of those ones where you're like, well, what caused this? So you start to pull the string, and then you shortly realize you're going to never stop pulling that string. Like, it just goes on and on and on, and it's continual chain reactions.
The context that's there behind anything, like we all have the stuff we learned in high school, or that we didn't learn in high school. In my case, or maybe your guys' case as well.
Yeah.
But the one of the things is you get back into it, or you start learning about a particular topic, and you just kind of dive down the rabbit hole, whether it's on the internet or reading a book or whatever that is. We just interviewed, in fact, actually, we'll give you guys a preview to our next week's video. We interviewed someone from the original cast of the Broadway play Hamilton. So the guy who played George Washington, Christopher Jackson,
we interviewed him.
We interviewed him, and so
Wow.
he talks about how, with history, even he is learning, and when he was researching Hamilton and George playing the role of George Washington, what he learned and kind of brought back to the surface. He said that history as we learn it is something that's kind of set out, and it's just kind of dried out in the sun. And it's kind of our job as historians, right? Jen's job, or somebody else's job, to kind of bring that back to life, sprinkle some water on it and bring it back to life, so you can learn more of that context. Because a lot of times we can learn a subject matter and just assume it is what it is, but when there's so much more layer and depth, and like you said, you keep pulling that string, you're just going to keep pulling.
Yeah, I will have to say, so I listened to you were talking about Lewis and Clark. I listened to that episode. And just to give you an idea of just how well you teach it, I listened to the entire thing, and I was anticipating what was coming next. And then as I was sitting there listening to it, I was like, in this 9 to 12 minutes of listening to this video, I have learned more in 9 to 12 minutes than I did in 4 years of high school. I didn't know he shot himself in the head and in the stomach, and then he was still alive and begging for water and all this other stuff. And I'm like, why are we not talking about this kind of stuff? That's the stuff that I would remember. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I that's the best part of some of these. Like you said, it's the story. It's the story there. Like, that's a crazy story.
Yep. And it takes a very unique person to be able to deliver a story like that, but then deliver it to where you're intrigued and anticipating like what's coming next. So kudos to you. You have this very, what is it, kind of like news broadcaster vibe, but like
an interesting one.
Yeah. It's like, you watch all the newscasters and they're like, today at 7, and I'm like, shut up, I don't care, because you're gonna spit nothing but garbage. And then you come on, and all of a sudden it's your intro to what you're going to be talking about. No lie, I got goosebumps, and I was like, okay, something's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, so that was the biggest thing I took from history, because again, I went back to school not even 5 years ago. Right. And I consider myself a centralist, but I lean on the conservative side. And when you talk about history, it's very left leaning. And I could hold my own. I actually graduated 4.0. I could hold my own and still make the argument, because my whole stance was, I don't want to tell you what to think. That's not my job.
Right.
My job is to tell you how. How do historians come up with this? How do historians say that this is the fact? This is the primary source. This is what a person who was there who said this. What are you pulling out of this? Like, that's what I do. That's what a historian does. A good historian presents you with all of that information, and then you decide what to think.
Yeah. It only works like with certain groups, though. My daughter was asking me the other day, because she was interested in the going-ons of Israel and Palestine. She was asking, like, well, why is this happening? And I'm sitting there, I go, well, I could tell you about the Balfour Declaration, or I could just say they don't like each other, and we can talk about this later.
Right.
But it goes back to the same thing. Like, you can pull that string extremely far, and you're never going to stop.
Yeah.
But to kind of harken off what Doug was saying on how you can really captivate an audience, not just from what you write for your script, but actually how you display it. So kudos to the producer.
There we go.
But
it is true. He's good at that.
There's a term. It's called narrative history telling. Are you familiar with that? Probably one of the things that I love the most. There's a gentleman that I listen to as well, or he said that you can only learn so much from digging up pots. All right.
Yeah.
But if you can put yourself in a region of the world in a time period, like say you were going to put yourself, I don't know, in Venice, Italy in 1410, what would most likely be your occupation? And depending on what your occupation is, who are you most likely trading with?
Mhm.
And if you're trading, what kind of other stuff's coming there? So you can actually start to build a story, a narrative around simply starting somewhere.
Mhm.
What would it be like to live in a Roman outpost in Britannia?
Yeah.
And I found that fascinating, and it kind of was like, oh, I have a new way to learn history. I
Yeah.
don't have to score over all these books, or search for an interesting documentary. I have people that are willing to tell a fictional story that's factually based,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and just tell the facts,
Mhm.
and that's simply it.
Yeah, and I find, another thing is we try to take our giants of history and kind of put them in a box,
Mhm.
right? Like, and I try to always open up. I'm going to tell you about these amazing heroes, and I'm going to tell you about these evil, terrible people. And sometimes they're going to be the same person.
Mm.
And I want people to understand that these are humans. I want to humanize these people because they are going to do amazing things and then they're going to do terrible things. Just
Yeah.
like any other person, they're going to make good decisions and they're going to make bad decisions. But I don't want to hide from either of those things.
Right.
And I think that's also what a good historian does. I remember being at the Battle of Little Bighorn and standing there and trying to tell people, this is what people are seeing. They're seeing Crazy Horse right out in front, and he's not getting hit by any bullets. And it's so motivating for the rest of the American Indians to keep going because think of George Washington riding out in front. This is their leader, and he's
Yeah.
out there, and it seems divine that he's escaping all the bullets. It just, to them, it seems like a sign. And I want people to stand there and feel what that feels like. But sometimes we don't talk about those people in history because we don't want to put them in those places, but they deserve to be there because they did do that.
Yeah, and that's been one of the fun things about the YouTube channel too, because being in the military, right? You don't have too many artistic outlets, right? Former ship guy. Not I'm sitting on a ship all day.
Mhm.
Now I'm doing more desk stuff, and this has been fun because while she's kind of pulling the facts and doing the research and saying, hey, this is kind of what we're looking at the same time, over the past couple of years, we've learned that storytelling craft.
Mhm.
And we, just through the process of putting out a video and seeing what works and seeing what perform and all the feedback that you get from just, hey, I'm going to hit publish and we're going to see how it goes and all the stuff. You learn that. And so it's been fun for both of us,
Mhm.
right? She's gotten a lot better on camera over the past couple of
That's so
years.
true.
I've gotten better with, my amateur videography or editing
Mhm.
and kind of that storytelling narrative and how to use music to transition and kind of give you the feel for it and everything, because it brings context and texture to
Mhm.
that story, and it really draws you in, like you were saying, Doug, with the
Mhm.
Meriwether Lewis, because you're there, and so you're kind of like, oh, it feels like I'm walking from behind this bush over towards the house where the guy shot himself and all
Mhm.
that stuff.
You feel
And
like you're watching.
you feel like you're
Yeah.
there, kind
Mhm.
of drawn into it.
It's
And so
captivating. It's
and that's what's been super, super fun,
Mhm.
especially doing it together.
Yeah, the music definitely does sell it though. Like your background music, it was not only do you feel the story, but you also feel like you're immersed in the story because the music just kind of brings you right back to that time period. And then next thing you know, your 12 minutes is up and I'm just like, okay, what's the next video we're going to watch? Because I need to learn something else now.
Yeah, finding the right music is one of my favorite things. Was one of my, I
Mhm.
mean, editing for me takes a while. Like that video probably took me 6 to 7 hours.
Mhm.
Just sitting on my couch on a Sunday, to edit. But finding the music is probably one of my favorite parts of the process, because once you find the right one, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah,
It
okay,
makes
this is
the
gonna.
difference.
It makes a
Mhm.
huge difference. Like, this is going to be my main one, and I'm going to find as many similar songs as I can.
Mhm.
Unless you're kind of going from dark to light or whatever.
After a while, you probably see me throwing in like the girl from Ipanema, behind Pearl Harbor, and it doesn't really make any sense because I'm running out of ideas. Like I said, I'm not the producer.
Yeah, that's how I feel
But
too.
I'm
I'm not
managing
the
that. I'm managing.
So Scott, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You've admitted that you weren't like a real history buff person. So like I have to know at what point were you sitting there were you like editing, or were you just like, okay, now was there like a certain story that just kind of slowly brought you in to where you started expanding your knowledge base, or did you just kind of just
So-
get used to it.
So honestly, for me, it's been kind of story by story. I won't lie, like certain stories for me are just less interesting, right? Because it's niche or something like that, and some are just over the top. Oh my gosh, this is such an amazing story because here's what this historic figure did. But for me, when we started the channel, I knew that it would take me time. I knew right up front because I had done some family stuff. I had messed with YouTube a little bit since like 2018, and we started this in 2021. And so I knew right away that there would be kind of conflict between the two of us. And there still is sometimes. I'll try to cut stuff out, and she'll see like, hey, I talked
Like the
about
most
this.
important part.
I
know.
talked about this, and
It
this.
connects
Like,
the story.
you left it all out. I was like, but it was boring. And so we had that argument about, something, just the other day, and she usually wins those. But through that, again, what she's also gotten better at with the storytelling aspect of it is crafting those facts to fit a good, like a story narrative, because when you're telling that historical event or you're talking about that person, if you kind of have a mental map, it makes telling that story so much easier. I kind of call it like you're almost reeling the fish. You're constantly kind of casting a little bit. You're giving them a taste of what's coming, but then you're coming back and you're walking them towards what they know is kind of coming. And so that storytelling aspect of it, we've both of us together have really grown. And I joke sometimes that my goal is to make a history video that I would watch as a non-history nerd. If I could watch all the way through it and find it interesting, then that's my bar, right? So if I can watch it, then the history nerds should really love it. And so that's kind of the goal there. So it took me some time because we kind of had to, even though we'd been married for a while, it took us a while to kind of find each other's cadence. And when she's saying this, what does she mean? And sometimes it takes her, even today, it'll take her doing a couple takes. She'll spit the facts out early on in the day in the filming, then she'll put them out again in a later clip, and she'll have said it a couple times, so she'll be better later because it's smoother. So that it's all some of the normal editing stuff, and then we do a follow-up. Our podcast, Talk with History, is kind of a follow-up to that, so we go deeper in depth. And because I've already made the video, I only usually make the podcast until I made the video first, because then I know enough of the story and I can speak, intelligently to it. But it took some time. And to be perfectly honest, like I don't go seeking out history videos on YouTube.
You don't?
I honestly don't. Sometimes I do, just to be like, hey, a friend of ours who's another history creator, their video exploded. Okay, I'm going to watch and go see what he did to tell the story. I'm more interested in how did they tell the story, and maybe I'll kind of look at their subject matter or something like that.
Research purposes.
But I'm just, I like watching the tech stuff, or I like watching the producer side of things, or some of the travel stuff. Like that's what I'm interested in.
We're so lucky because of that.
Yeah,
because I know nothing about that. I wouldn't even know how to start editing anything. I would be so lost. So we are so lucky. I'm really, it feels like a great combination.
But
It's a pretty good duo.
Yeah, and really, Doug, we both kind of, at a certain point, we both kind of realized, like, story is king. Story is king. Story is king. Story is king. If you have an interesting story, an interesting historical event, but you don't tell the story well, or it's not presented well, and we've done that before.
Yeah.
I look at some of our old videos and we're like, oh my gosh, like,
that's boring.
I hope nobody goes back and finds that. So story is king, even with those historical events.
I think when you use that storytelling method, not only one is it is gonna make it a little bit more interesting for people who can't just sit there and read textbooks, and like I will go and read 100-year-old news articles to figure out the pulse of the culture at the time.
Sure.
That's just me. But I can still go back and watch your video and be enthralled.
Right.
And just find it fascinating and very captivating. But it'll help people kind of remember, but it'll help them understand more.
Yeah,
in my opinion, because they're like, okay, I kind of see how that person came to that decision, because there's so much context, and like we had stated before, history is not black and white. I heard I heard a comment the other day. I was watching something on the Cold War, and so the Cold War starts directly after World War II.
Mhm.
And they made the comment that said Hitler was the worst of mankind's creations, but they were very specific when they said mankind's creation. It was like, well, something had to create that man,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
what did, you know?
Mhm.
And that it makes you want to go back and be like, okay, well, what are the conditions that created this one event, you
Mhm.
know, within the world? Like, you know, why was Constantinople constantly being conquered?
Yeah.
You know, what's so important about it? You know, you can go back and do that stuff. But let's talk about favorite topics. I hear John Wayne brought up a lot.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
this one.
I'm a
All
huge
right, so
okay,
lay it on me.
dudes. I mean, come on, guys. Like I was a pilot in the Navy, right? I'm so
Mhm.
used to hanging around dudes. It's like not even funny. My call sign was Yoko because I broke up the band, right?
Oh my
It was
god.
Yeah.
first female in the squadron. And my father was a high school football coach. My father was a cop, right? I have a brother who played football. Like I'm raised on John Wayne. I love John
awesome.
Wayne. Like I will go to my grave. The Searchers is the best Western of all time. Like I cannot wait to talk about that and talk about the anti-hero. And
Yeah.
I think it's John Wayne's
We
best
we have a couple
performance.
more John Wayne videos coming.
And
That's awesome.
and that is kind of what started the channel because I was on my treadmill and it was COVID and I was looking up John Wayne Museum. And then I was like, has anyone been to Maureen O'Hara's grave? Because most people do not know that she's buried in Arlington National Cemetery.
I
Maureen
did
O-
not know that. Yeah.
Maureen O'Hara is one of John Wayne's great co-stars, right? She was
Oh.
in The Quiet Man. She's in McClintock. You know,
Mhm.
it's really the redhead, right? The prairie redhead. And she was married to a brigadier general in the Air Force. And
Wow.
he died in the 70s, a long time before her, and
Mhm.
she outlived him. But so most people kind of forget, but she's buried in Arlington, and
It's-
no one had visited her grave on YouTube.
No, well, a lot of people don't understand that the spouses
Mhm.
of the service members that are buried in Arlington can be buried with them.
Yes.
My,
Yes.
unfortunately, my grandmother recently passed away, but my grandfather is buried in Arlington.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
cool.
So she had the opportunity. However, she denied it because
Yeah.
she said that that's where our heroes go to lay, and so she wanted to keep that there for him.
Yeah.
But I had no idea
Mhm.
that she was buried there. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's one of our first videos
That
from
was-
Arlington.
That was kind of our first positive signal that we were doing something
As
right.
I would visit Maureen O'Hara, and that took off because a lot of people didn't know that. A lot of people like her. She's connected to
Mhm.
John Wayne, and so to go to her grave and to talk about her, I kind of found this really great. I don't know if it's a niche, but I did other people in Arlington that way. I did the Gunny, right? I could go to their grave and sit with them. Charles Durning, people who were a part of the entertainment industry, but are now in Arlington National Cemetery. So it was so great to tell their story with them and a great way to honor them. And for me, it was just a great experience. And so then as a veteran and to be there and talk about what Arlington means to me. And then I could visit some people we knew. I could talk
Mhm.
about people who influenced my military career who were there. So it was that was one of our first videos and probably the first video to really take off.
Yeah, that was first
Mhm.
one really take off, and now we've been back there a bunch of times, and
But John Wayne
know,
is huge.
yeah, John Wayne's a good one.
We
Let's-
compare the two True Grit movies. That is a huge video.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's great.
Let's talk about service for a second.
Mhm.
I know for myself, all right, as a Navy guy, especially as a submariner, fourth generation, right? History is a big deal for
Mhm.
our culture, and it has a tendency to be a big deal for just the military members in general. Do you feel like your time in the service or your current time in the service and what you're learning there and knowing that you're part of a long history of something kind of inform you or help you along or inspire you more to do what you're doing? Or
I'd say, for me, guys, there's not a lot of women who do this, right? There's not a lot of women pilots, period, right? And so I feel, and maybe it's the confidence that comes out, but I feel very confident in what I do I think the education helped me be more confident in what I say.
Mhm.
And then being out there to represent, I really take that seriously. There was another pilot named Jennifer, who was a helicopter pilot, who went down in Iraq,
Mhm.
and she was killed there. So I think about a bunch of people that didn't make it home, and I take the risk and I take the chance for them because they can't. And I try to go, I'm going to live my life as much as I can because they can't. And sometimes if I would have been more timid and I'm not going to try that, I'm like, no, I'm going for it because I can.
Yeah, and I think it's, in some sense, it's probably similar to why, Doug, you probably helped stand up the, Guardians of the Purple Heart. And
Mhm.
it's like, if there's something I want to do, I'm going to give myself the mission and I'm going to attack, right? I'm going to move towards that mission, whatever that mission is. And for us, when we joke that after 15 years, we finally found something that we enjoy doing together, and that's the YouTube channel. But for us, it kind of put everything together. And then it also, again, that confidence of like, we have no idea what we're doing, but we're just going to go and do it anyways. And we're going to figure it out along the way because that's what we do. And that comes from, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here,
Mhm.
That comes from being in the military. When your commanding officer or your boss or whoever it is says, hey, you kind of just need to figure this one out. You're like,
Mhm.
okay, let's go.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what gave us the confidence to start the channel, with history, with her background and me wanting to kind of do the production side and enjoying that piece of it. And then, again, me just kind of doing all the research on like, how do we need to do this? And
Mhm.
how does it all set up? And then, okay, now we're going to drag the kids along with us and everything that
Mhm.
kind of comes with that. And then, like anything else, I think anytime you talk to fellow vets, a lot of us have that perspective that a lot of folks who hadn't had the opportunity to serve, even though we've met plenty of people who said, oh, I wish I could have, or this, that, and the other. You
Mhm.
just get a perspective that not a lot of people get, whether it's from deployments or from what you've seen,
Mhm.
in your few years or a full career or whatever that is. And so when you have that perspective, when you're talking about stories and historical context, and you, that just helps. It kind of
Mhm.
helps you as the artist crafting that story, paint the picture a little clearer, hopefully.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that stems from that.
Yeah, and
your military
you
background.
guys are really, I mean, you pay a wonderful respect to a lot of aspects of history, but as well as some military stuff. I
Mhm.
think you guys recently did a Medal of Honor video.
Yes. So I was
Yeah.
asked by a fellow history creator on Instagram to visit that grave because they were doing a story.
Mhm.
And because I'm very much an on location historian. That's kind of what sets me apart, right? Is I go to the location and tell you
Mhm.
about it. And I was going to Arlington anyway, and I told him absolutely. So I looked him up and his story, and I sat there with the Medal of Honor recipient. I told his story, and then it coincided with they did a long form video of their story,
Yeah,
so it worked out.
that was
Mhm.
Instagram. And then we had
Yeah.
done another Medal of Honor one. I think it was who was the local Carney,
Oh yeah.
Sergeant Carney.
So Sergeant Carney is from the Civil War. You remember in the movie Glory, he's kind of
Mhm.
played by Denzel Washington and
Yeah.
Kind of carries the flag.
carries the flag.
Yeah.
So he's the first African American to be awarded the Medal of Honor. He didn't receive it first because someone else got the actual physical medal before he did, but his action preceded that other person's action. So
Yeah.
he was the first one to receive it. So
Yeah, he's
yes.
buried here in the Norfolk area. So we
Mhm.
visited his grave, and there's a marker. We
Mhm.
found his marker, and kind of tried to tell that story. So
Yeah.
And that is, I love that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for doing that. I think that's pretty awesome. I mean, because there's stories that shouldn't kind of fade to history, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They should continue to be told.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's some crazy stuff you guys are doing. Doug, you got another question to add in there? Like I said, I got my homework. So
I
many.
mean, not history related, but I mean, I always have to know just because I just love it. But what's your guys' favorite pizza? We'll go completely off topic
Oh,
here.
Pizza for me, my favorite pizza is probably pretty controversial.
I know.
At least
boy.
people tend to have strong feelings. So
We get people mad at us when we tell them.
so I'm a pepperoni and pineapple guy. I like
I'll
pineapple
agree
on
with that.
pizza.
Mhm.
Some people I've literally
That's an
had friends
interesting
who
combo.
didn't. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's so good because it's the sweet with the
Yep.
spicy.
I've
Yep.
had like
Mhm.
close friends that didn't know that I like that. They'll that topic comes up and they'll be like, if you like pineapple on your pizza, don't ever talk to me again. We cannot be friends, et cetera, et cetera. I jokingly, but so for me, that's honestly my favorite.
And I could eat that too. Actually, when we used to do a lot of like climbing and stuff, and you're so exhausted, that was a really good treat. But I'll try to
That's right.
sometimes.
You're rock climbers.
Yeah, I
This
am.
guy did El Cap. He's done the nose of El Cap twice. He did
Yeah.
the face of Half Dome. This guy
Yeah.
is a big wall rock climber.
That's
No
awesome.
joke.
Out
I
there
mean,
pulling on some rock.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
He was a Naval Academy gymnast. So, yeah, he's the real deal.
Wow.
I know. That's what I said.
I don't usually bring that up with random strangers that I just met on the internet, but that's okay. I'll let her
It's
bring it up.
impressive though. It's a definitely a fun sport to get into. We
Mhm.
actually we got a family membership to Central Rock Gym
Oh, right on.
here, and the whole family fell in love with it. Like
Yeah.
I'd done it multiple times before, and then gone out to actually climb
Yep.
a couple times. But I was like, well, let's just go do it. And sure enough, they all fell in love with it, especially when
Mhm.
they're a bunch of little kids that climb
Yeah.
on everything anyways.
Mhm.
So it's perfect for them.
Yeah, I tried to start a climbing gym when I actually got out of the Navy for about a year or two. That's what I tried to do. But 2010, after the Great Recession, was not a great time to start a business.
Hey, I tried
So-
to start a comic book store. So try
Yeah.
selling picture books to big kids. It's not as
Yeah.
easy as it looks.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned, well, you mentioned multiple times you're the traveling historian, the on scene historian. But I've heard the phrase evergreen
Hmm.
Mhm.
used a few times. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so that's a concept that I actually got from there's a podcast out there, Dusty Porter. He has the YouTube Creators Podcast, right?
Mhm.
And he basically just kind of talks to other creators and talks about what they learned building a YouTube channel. So I listened to that for a while. Like anything else, I'm researching the hell out of, how do I make a successful YouTube channel? And he talked about evergreen content, and evergreen content is something that you could listen to it today, you could listen to it 3 years ago, you could listen to it in 10 years, and it's still the same story. It's still relevant. It lasts no matter what. If we're
Mhm.
sitting here talking about the most recent tech stuff, well, in a couple years, it's going to be out of date. But if we're talking about history, and that's why I knew when she brought this up, she said, hey, I want to start a history channel. In my head, I was like, ding, I know for a fact that will work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so that's that evergreen content. Like if you tell it right, and you don't kind of try to interject too much modern day
Mhm.
kind of context and comparisons, you can keep that story evergreen so that, again, if you tell it properly,
Mhm.
in 5 years, someone could watch the video we just
Yep.
published the other day on Meriwether Lewis, and it's going to be the same story. It's going to be the same engaging story,
He's
ideally.
been dead since 1809. So if you're telling the same story, think of it as a great rerun, right? It holds its syndication.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to, the content is good. Someone could watch that same video 10 years from now and all the information is still the same.
I could watch I Love Lucy till the day I die. and be fine with it.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Right.
Right. Because it's still
Well, but
relevant.
you're right. We had a video that we put up that we were toying around with the idea of doing Medal of Honor recipients as well.
Mhm.
And we did Master Sergeant what was it Roy Benavides? Yeah. And his story, and like that just kind of did
Yep.
quite well for itself, for a small channel. But I was like,
Yeah.
all right, well, that shows that if people are interested, people care. And it wasn't anything special. It was literally just his speech. I
Yeah.
think it was I think Reagan might have been speaking at the time,
Oh, cool.
or someone. But yeah, it's true. They are evergreen things. I think
Mhm.
I've gone back and I've listened to Tides of History's podcast entire catalog twice by now.
Mhm.
But it's the same thing. It's that narrative history telling that
Yep.
I love so much, and you guys are a great addition to that.
Yeah.
So now we have some questions
Oh, yeah.
about history.
Yes.
We are the Guardians of the Purple Heart.
That's so
Is
cool.
there anything that's fun you can tell us about the Purple Heart Award?
Well, George Washington is on the Purple Heart.
Mhm.
And George Washington originated the metal, but it really wasn't what it is today when he first started it.
Mhm.
I think the first Purple Heart that actually was a Purple Heart came out during the Civil War for being injured during combat or injured during
Mhm.
battle. I think for George Washington, his Purple Heart, he was giving it to people who had served.
Mhm.
And so it kind of took a transition between the Revolutionary War to the Civil War to what it is today. If you are a Purple Heart recipient, your name is in a book in Mount Vernon. You can go ask to see it.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Yep.
Hmm.
And
I
so if
didn't
you
know
are
that.
a Purple Heart recipient, you go to Mount
feel
Vernon.
Really
ask-
bad for not knowing that.
You can ask to see your name in the book. It's
That's
on the
cool.
second floor of Mount Vernon. So
Wow.
you will be allowed, if your family, whoever, you're allowed to go up there and look and see your name in the book with the Purple Heart.
Doug, we might have to take a trip.
Yeah. Those are things I
Yeah.
know about it.
We might have to. I mean, I think the whole book idea is really, I mean, it's awesome because like your name is kind of like etched in history forever. And having that, I would say it's kind of cool. But then again, I would have to say on like the psychological side of things, I look at it and go,
It's a big
I
book.
I wouldn't want to see my name in a book and reminding me of the
Sure.
day that I
Mhm.
possibly almost died, right? It's
Sure.
like I have, I've been through multiple surgeries because of my injuries overseas, and everyone tells me wear them as a badge of honor that, you made it through. And yeah, I do, but at the same time, it's that constant reminder too. So I'd have to say on the psychological side of things, I could see how it would be a little bit troublesome. But I
Mhm.
mean, either way, I still think that's awesome. We need to take
Yeah.
a trip.
Yeah. Well, your name is in a book in Mount Vernon. And I think it's reminiscent of George Washington. So I think that is what they're trying, because his face is on
Mhm.
the heart and your name is in his house.
So my question is just fun. Can you tell me anything about Doc Holliday?
Oh man. So
So-
people keep recommending to us.
So we're going to have to
Just because I
compare.
love Tombstone.
We're going to have to
so
compare the
but
two
We were
movies.
just watching it the other night.
Yeah, we're going to
So
have to
good.
compare the two movies because people love the True Grit comparison.
Mhm.
We're going to have to do Wyatt Earp and Tombstone.
Yeah.
We've been to Deadwood. It was super cool. Recommend going. I
Nice.
think Val Kilmer played him better. I do. What did we just learn about Big Nose Kate the other day that was neat? That
I don't
something was
remember.
named after her. And most people don't know it was named after. So Big Nose Kate is Doc Holliday's, lack of better words, girlfriend.
Mhm.
He is a doctor. He's a doctor of dentistry.
Oh,
That's what he's a doctor of.
And I'll tell you what, just from like a traveling around the United States perspective, I was so surprised at South Dakota.
Yeah.
That part of South Dakota where Deadwood is,
Mhm.
right near Mount Rushmore. It's gorgeous out there. It's like hilly and like not almost mountainous, depending on what you're kind of comparing, as mountains. But just that part of the country, I can 100% understand why people were just flocking out there,
Mhm.
because
yeah.
it is beautiful country. We went out, right? When
Mhm.
she said when we went out there, we did this whole Western road trip. And so took the kids, and I mean, we drove 6,000 plus miles over the course of a couple
Jeez.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were hitting it hard. But we were out there. We stayed in South Dakota for a couple days for a family reunion, because I've got family in Montana and Colorado and California. And so we all kind of met, semi in the middle.
We're sorry. All of our representatives are still assisting other customers. Please remain on the line as we value your call.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, Doc Holliday had tuberculosis. I know that.
Yeah.
And when we were in Deadwood, do you know what the dead man's hand is? What Wild Bill
No.
Hickok was holding when he died?
Oh, yeah.
Ace
Well, I
8.
don't remember the hand, but I know.
There you
of
go. Aces over eights.
Yeah. And
Aces
then-
over
Yep,
eights.
so-
aces over 8s.
And
Yeah,
one
that's
thing,
the dead man's hand.
where was the OK Corral shootout? Was that the
Arizona.
I'm still hung up on the fact that you gave me that Doc was a dentist,
Yeah.
yeah.
which was interesting because I believe during that time period, dentists were also often barbers. or it was barbers were often
No,
dentists.
barbers were also surgeons, I think it was, because that's
Something
where.
like that.
So
'Cause
if you
they're
look
steady
outside the
hands.
barber, see,
Yeah.
maybe I'm going to teach you a little bit of history, Seth.
Yeah, the spinning.
Wow, buy a lottery
Maybe,
ticket, yo.
maybe.
ready.
Is it that spinny thing?
With the red and the
Yeah.
white.
Yep, it's because
Mhm.
they used to put the bloody rags on
Mhm.
the thing, the white pole, and
Yeah.
it would spin around,
Mhm.
and
Ah.
then they would use it to dry them out that way.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
But
Oh,
but
find
surgeons
that
could
fast.
pull
Good
teeth,
job,
so you can
Doug.
kind of put them both together, the teeth pulling, and so
Yeah.
I could see that.
Either way.
Yeah.
I just
So-
I just love Tombstone and I love that character so much.
Yeah,
He's so good.
'cause
Val
we-
Kilmer's so good.
So where was the Tombstone, the city? Was that Arizona?
It's in Arizona.
It says Arizona. So wasn't it Lisa that we were talking to?
Mm-hmm.
So our friend Lisa, she's got a pretty big Instagram channel, Historical USA.
Mhm.
So her family's from the Arizona area, and her great grandmother
Yeah, it was there.
was actually at the shootout at the OK Corral.
She was there.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
know.
Really?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So she was from Arizona, lived a hard life, but that was something that was passed down in her family. That
Yeah.
she was there at the actual shootout.
Another cool thing about history, genealogy, right? People want to know who they're connected to
Yeah.
in history,
Mhm.
right?
No, I have that for music history in my family, oddly
Mhm.
enough.
Huh.
Yeah, speaking of which, my fiance is she has direct ties with Abraham Lincoln and like a part of I forget who in her family, like they were there in the theater when he was shot.
Oh my
And
gosh, in
she
Ford's
has
Theater.
like all this memorabilia of like letters and stuff like that, like hanging up downstairs in our living room. But I mean, that part is kind of
That's neat.
interesting.
Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah.
See, I
And-
have
And yes, Han Solo did shoot first.
yes, right? Just saying.
It's fact.
Facts.
I'm not a Star Trek fan. So I
Fact,
wouldn't know.
Princess Leia is the hero of that movie.
Yeah, okay.
Fact.
Don't get her started.
All right. So for my wife and I, our individual families, the Sharps, and then one of the sides of her family, the Maxwells, have very deep Scottish roots.
Mhm.
Hers more so than mine. All right. So like the Maxwell clan has a castle in Scotland.
Oh, wow.
It's this beautiful, awesome triangle castle with a moat around it. The leader of the Maxwell clan was one of like I think the 22 clan and leaders that signed the equivalent of Scotland's Declaration of Independence as a letter to the Pope at the time, which it's cool to show my children. Be like, this is your heritage.
Mhm.
You know, your family name is attached to a country existing.
Yep.
Where mine is the only reason why I know my ancestry is because Scotland prisons have really good prison records.
That's
So
right.
the joke is that I married up.
Yeah.
That her family owned the castle and my family was probably in the jail cell.
In the dungeon.
We were always caught stealing horses or food, one of the
Yeah.
two things. And it's cool, like the genealogical
Mhm.
history as well. My great grandparents met at the Hoover Dam while it was being built.
Oh, shit.
My great grandfather was a foreman there after he got out of the service,
That's cool.
and he would have back then when you have giant projects like that, there's just small towns that pop
Mhm.
up around the projects, right?
Yep.
So they would have big chow halls and stuff, and people would move in from all over the United States to go to work there. And my great grandmother was one of the cooks in this chow hall. So my grandfather every day would go to make sure that his guys were getting fed well. Goes down there, sees that they're all happy and laughing, they're enjoying great food, goes to talk to the cook to thank her, and is just floored by her. And so every day he would come back
Yeah.
to check on his guys and make
Yeah.
sure they were being fed. And eventually the two fell in love and they got
That's
married.
cute.
And
That's
it
awesome.
all kind of built around the Hoover Dam, and
Yeah.
which is a giant thing for the United States, right? So that genealogical history. My grandfather was part of the USS Torsk, which was the submarine that was part of the naval blockade during the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Oh, wow.
chasing
Oh my gosh.
down the Russian submarine that actually had a nuclear torpedo pointed right at us.
Mhm.
Wow.
So to know like your family is part of history and stuff,
Mhm.
that you kind of realize that history isn't just facts, it's who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a really cool piece of merchandise. I'm gonna share it here. I love it. Says history or die.
I'm wearing it.
Yeah, we just came up with that one.
I love it.
Yeah,
I absolutely love it. And there's
Yeah.
and the bumper sticker that's next to it that says I rake for historic markers. Right. So a couple of years ago, I had bought my wife like a big GPS for her car because her car at the time didn't have one. And so I set it all up for her. And when I started, I realized that there's History Channel logos all over the map. And apparently the version that I got was contracted with History Channel. And
Oh.
it shows all the historical spots that are around you, wherever you are.
That's
That's cool.
cool.
I don't need a GPS. I still have this thing. For
Yeah.
that reason. Like,
Well, I love that bumper sticker because I was really doing that.
Yeah,
Like we were driving and I would be like, slow down, historic marker. I want to read it real fast. And I told Scott, we should make a bumper sticker to warn people because we're slowing down to read these. And so he's like, I'll make it. So that was kind of funny. The history or die, we were going out somewhere and he had a shirt on that said join or die. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if we could wear this with the channel and it said history? And he's like, I'm going to make it right now.
Yeah.
hey, I had the saying like for my entire life, which was stay heavy, stay metal.
Yeah.
I grew up in a heavy metal family, and we turned it into our kind of our sign off. That stay proud, stay grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fun thing with the history or die, we're actually kind of trying to do some kind of history content, community content support behind that. So if you we're starting a website, actually historyordie.org. It's kind of in a soft launch kind of phase right now. But what we're trying to do is bring on, basically make it like a place for people to go find good history creators, and then from there kind of go off to their channel. So we just kind of started reaching out to the people we knew, and then I literally went on YouTube and started finding some of the biggest history content creators I could, and I just emailed them blind, right, and just said, hey, I'm starting this site.
Who does that?
Yeah, exactly. and I basically just said, hey, the concept is a rising tide lifts all boats, and so we're hoping that no cost to you. I made a Google form. They fill it out in 5-10 minutes, and I just kind of create a profile page for them. And then I ask them, hey, the concept behind history or die is it's kind of a nod to that join or die, which is that call for unity, right? Hey, we're trying to get together to learn history because it's important. Same thing with the join or die that Ben Franklin put out in May of 1754. So he put it out then, and it was like, hey, we need to stay together because if we don't, then we're gonna die. And so that's the concept is that call of, hey, good quality history content is really gonna it can only help, right?
Yeah.
It'll keep us together. And so I'm working on some stuff. We're getting busy because I'm PCSing soon, and trying to get some of the big channels to promote the site, which will bring up the smaller channels because we'll get lots of people there and kind of just build it. And so any history or die stuff that's bought off of our Walk with History gift shop actually goes towards that site. And we try not to put ourselves out front. This is kind of a community thing.
Think of it as the History Channel.
Yeah. So
that has real history.
I love it. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. But that's awesome. One of my favorite shirts we made recently. That's a cool one.
Well, Doug, you got anything left?
I just need to know,
tank over there.
Out of all the places that you've been, what is like the number one place that you want to go and do an episode on? So it'd be like your dream vacation of a history episode.
Your bucket list.
Yeah.
Like the big bucket list.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did we? Probably the Monument Valley of the Searchers.
I mean, for me, so I'd say within America, it's definitely going out to Monument Valley in Utah.
Trying to recreate some of those scenes from The Searchers, right? When he's like looking over the valley and...
I want to retire in Utah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
So I'd say here in America, that's definitely like highest on our list. For me personally, if I was going to do, I could go anywhere, right? Budget, no price. I've always wanted to go to Switzerland because I just think that the country is just as a kid, right? Purely there. And I'm sure there's history there. Like there's the Matterhorn and stuff like that, right? Being a climber, there's plenty of history there. when it comes to that kind of realm. And I would love to go see, like Seth, like you were saying, some of those just truly ancient
Yeah.
sites. Like if we were going to do a world travel for a year for the channel, that's kind of what I'd probably start with, is some of those truly ancient sites.
Yeah.
Right, going to Istanbul and going into the cathedral there and seeing Viking graffiti
Yes.
up on the
Yeah.
walls from the
Petra.
Visigoths and stuff.
Petra.
know.
I'd like to go to Petra.
You know, you
Oh,
see the
that'd be
pyramids,
fun.
even though I know a lot of that stuff, there's touristy stuff around it now. Like,
Mhm.
but I would love to do that stuff. And then I'm sure you give me enough time, I'll find some places that are off the beaten path, and then I'll really be in my element, kind of away from the crowds.
Yeah, but let's go
you
to.
know.
I want to go to Jerusalem and find the Holy Grail.
Right, right. And there's a lot of places around the world where you just, if you get an opportunity to go see them, you should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They won't always be there, even if they're natural ones. Like me, I grew up with, what was it? The Old Man in the Mountain up in New Hampshire, right?
Mhm.
No longer there.
Yeah.
But it's, we'll look at China, for instance. China during the 50s and the 60s lost a large portion of its heritage sites.
Yeah. Italy
Um,
was doing that too during World War II.
yeah, Italy as well, and it's
Mhm.
such a shame. But
Mhm.
I would love to set foot in just ancient Greek,
Yeah.
and Roman areas.
Yeah.
And, I just
The
take me there,
Acropolis.
please.
Yeah, I would too. I would like to see some Greek. We were in I think it was Italia, Turkey, with the Navy, and I was sitting in a Colosseum eating a sandwich, and they were like, "This has been around since 1500 BC," and I'm just sitting there eating a sandwich, going, "I'm sitting here where people sat and watched, and it's been around since before Christ." Like it's just,
Right?
it's hard for me to even fathom,
They
right? And I'm just
they
sitting.
just did the entire score from the Gladiator
Yeah.
inside the Roman Colosseum.
Oh,
I was like, how you get better than that?
I know.
Have a
Doug,
whole
where
orchestra
would
in
you
there?
go if you could go anywhere?
Anywhere
Where-
but Connecticut. No, I'm kidding.
Anywhere pizza's made.
I really don't know. Like I'm a huge like I'm really big into the Renaissance.
Mhm.
So I
cool.
really would love to visit like England and Scotland and
Yeah.
all that. I think that countryside is just absolutely gorgeous. Switzerland is, I mean, I agree with you. It's absolutely
Mhm.
like you look at the pictures and stuff, and it just seems like a magical place to go to. But I don't think I have a like number one place that I would like to go, because I mean, and then this is going to sound kind of cheesy and cliche, but I drive down the road, even if I drive an hour away from my house. Like I'm thankful enough just to be able to visit that area, because like you
Absolutely.
said, there's people who don't have that opportunity.
Mhm.
So I mean, I get excited when we drive down to Long Island for a weekend. So it's
You're like the
but
only
I would love-
person. No, I'm joking.
yeah, I know. But
Yeah.
I mean, I would definitely love to do like the Switzerland, Ireland,
Yeah.
Scotland, London, all that
Yeah.
stuff.
So we did
Super
Ireland
cool.
and Scotland. We didn't know we were pregnant with our first. And I drank Guinness like every day. So I always say our first was swimming in Guinness. We went to Kong, Ireland when they filmed The Quiet Man,
John
Yep.
Wayne movie.
the John Wayne movie. We stayed in Ashford Castle where the whole cast stayed, and we walked like a lot of the scenes of The Quiet Man. We walked and did all of them. That was cool to do. Like
Wow.
and we watched The
Yeah.
Quiet Man pretty much every St. Patrick's Day. So it was neat to actually be there and to see it. And if you watch our top 10 John Wayne, like it's in there for me. It's
coming.
and-
That video's coming. That
Yeah.
video's not out
and
yet.
that was like his my top 10. That's his youngest role, and I think he's 45 in it. But I think
Wow.
that's like John Wayne at his almost his best.
I'm trying to
Wow.
think. I can't remember the name of it. It's a temple in India.
Mm-hmm.
And the only aspects that I remember of it is that monks would go live their entire lives there. And the point of the temple is that it's built like a ziggurat, right? So
Mhm.
you wind around it all the way to the top. And the entire pathway, there are carvings that are like independent of each other. And there's lessons to be learned from every carving. So monks would spend their entire lives meditating in front of a carving, trying to to divine the deep meaning of what's there, and slowly work their way up all the way to the top. When you get there, the view is so alien almost
Yeah.
that it's like you've actually reached nirvana.
Oh, wow.
And that was the whole point of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was that by then, if you have sussed out the meanings of each one of these things, then you have become enlightened, and then this is that place for you. And I
That's
just
cool.
found that fascinating.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Well, you're a very visual guy. Comic books,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I mean, if you're walking a tower and you're not looking out because you're staring at the carving and you're not looking the other way, then when you finally get to the top is the first time you're looking, then yeah, it probably would seem awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
That makes sense.
But that's what I'm talking about.
That's cool.
Places like those that
Yeah.
are,
No,
that are
I-
crazy.
Yeah, that's neat. That is neat though.
Yeah, that's one of the places we had actually tried to go was Nepal.
Yeah,
We wanted to do the hike to Everest Base Camp.
to Kemet,
Um,
yeah. And
but
it's off limits.
when I got out of the Navy at the time, it was off limits.
Mhm.
So I couldn't go. So
Well, I think that's where we'll call it for the day. I could sit here all night and talk about history with you
Yeah.
guys. I love people that I can learn from. And
It's fun.
fantastic. Yeah, it is. It is. And especially like Doug and I were talking about, the way that you guys deliver the history makes you want to know more, makes you want to know more about, American history in general. And it can sometimes spark that thirst for it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is great. I think you guys do an amazing service to the history itself,
thank you.
and a service to everyone else by continuing to teach it.
Yeah.
I agree.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
and also
I agree.
thank you for your service.
Thank you
Yes,
for your
thank you.
service.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Even the
No
army
problem.
guy. No, I'm just-
Even the
Oh.
army guy. So yeah, Doug's hating this.
You
because
got no
as the years
chance.
go by. There's more Navy guys joining.
Bunch
the
of Navy
organization.
folks on this. You got no chance.
So
Doug.
I'll admit before we cut out, I will admit. So I work for the Fleet and Family Support Center at our submarine base here in Connecticut.
Oh
and
yeah, okay.
Aw.
since I've started working for them, I've said the Army and the Marines, they're there to just like mess stuff up. The Navy and the Air Force are definitely the smarter of the branches, because it's like some of these people I talk to, I mean, granted, a lot of them are nukes and they have to just like dissect everything. But I will admit, I am outnumbered in the smart department here.
No, it was great. It was
This
really
hurts.
great.
This was super fun, guys, and we'll absolutely
Thank
make
you.
sure that we share this a bunch whenever you
Mhm.
guys kind of end up getting it posted. So
Yeah,
We
and thank you for
appreciate
what
it.
you
Thank
do, guys.
Thank
yeah,
you. Appreciate
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I hope that anybody watching, especially anybody from our audience,
Mhm.
that may come over here and watch this and make it to this point, like support your guys' Guardians of the Purple Heart Foundation. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really
I
awesome.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
I'm just
that.
gonna close this tab. How to sound smart at history. So yeah. So real quick before we close out, tell us where we can find you guys. I know you got the merchandise, which we brought up there. I'm absolutely getting one of these and one of these. The shirt and the bumper sticker. I love it. I break for historic markers. I love it so much. And then we have our YouTube channel,
Yep.
and we can find you on, I'm assuming, Spotify.
Yeah,
Amazon Music, all that stuff.
so our Walk with History stuff, obviously on YouTube. The probably easiest place to find everything that we're doing is our main website, which you can get to that main link on our YouTube channel, but it's walkwithhistory.net. So walkwithhistory.net, you'll find links to our podcast, which is Talk with History. I try a newsletter. I'm not very good at being consistent about it, so it went from monthly to bi-monthly. But yeah, so pretty active on Instagram. If you kind of for daily stuff, if you really want to interact with us, Instagram, Walk with History. Jen's very, very active on there.
Yeah,
and the community's growing pretty fast.
Let us know where you're going to be.
Yeah.
I saw your booths and stuff. I would love to come out and collaborate and make a reel. I like doing Instagram, like daily things. There are some people who are much more into the daily quick bites of history, and there's people who like the longer form videos. So.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I'll promise you this: as I go throughout my travels, because I'm always looking for fun history stuff. If I stumble across anything good, I'll make a post for it, and I'll tag you guys.
Perfect.
Perfect.
All right,
Perfect.
it's gonna be awesome. So yeah, and you guys get your Patreon, I believe, as well.
We do have our Patreon. You know what? I love when people go over there. In the future, when I actually am not working full time and getting ready to move and all that stuff, I will invest more time into being able to put more out exclusive content. Really, if you find our YouTube channel or if you find our podcast, those are the two places that we point people to the most. Patreon's great, but I definitely don't push it out there too much because that's not the primary goal right now. The primary goal is for us to inspire people to get out there and go find historic places. So,
well, you've successfully inspired over 22,000 people to watch your channel. So
Yes.
Yeah.
bravo to you guys.
22,00001.
I love it.
There we go.
This
I'll
guy.
take it.
Yeah, we are. I subscribed on my personal account and the show's account. So got you there.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And if we want to do this again, if you ever guys want to come back on, all you got to do is ask.
Awesome.
Once
Yeah,
you kind
definitely.
of come into the fold of the Guardian family, you're here to stay as long as you want. If you're in the area, want to come out to an event,
I'm
we'll have
kidding.
you there.
I'm kidding.
Jeez. Yeah, if you're in the area at any point in time, and you want to come out to an event that we're having, you're more than welcome. You can be our guest of honor. Maybe we can actually get you in the studio. If that's ever the case, I don't expect some surface sailors to make it up to Connecticut.
It'd be a little tougher for me.
Right. I'll leave Jen, I'll leave you with this. I have 2 German shepherds that are named Maverick and Goose.
Nice.
You guys are going to love this. My maiden name before I married Scott was Mitchell. So I was Lieutenant Mitchell, and I heard all the jokes that my name wasn't the best in the Navy.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Top Gun is Nick, our producer and our president for the Connecticut chapter, and mine's favorite movie, followed very, very closely by Wayne's World.
Hey, they're both great.
Yeah.
And you happen to forget that my ride name in the motorcycle community happens to be Goose.
it is
Oh,
Goose.
that's awesome.
That is
That's
true.
so
That is
awesome.
true.
That's awesome.
So, all right, folks. Well, we'll close it down here. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. I know
Yes,
I've
thank
already
you.
said it, but we greatly appreciate it. If you're watching at home, make sure you subscribe to Walking with History. And if you're watching us for the first time, it'd be cool if you subscribe to us as well.
Yeah.
You know, but they got a cooler show.
That's
All right, folks, we'll take it home from here. As usual, thanks for watching. Share, like, subscribe, and stay proud, stay grateful, and we'll see you next time. Walking with history.
That was
walking with
awesome.
History. Walking with
Oh my
history.
God.
That'll be my outro. I don't know.